Okay, so here we are again, guys and dolls, and ready to dig into episode number 2, part A, because without a part A, there can't be a part B, of course. And let's get into it, because as I said before, the game is afoot. So, okay, so let's try this and see what's going on. The game is definitely afoot here. All right. So, this crime took place during an extremely turbulent time for us as Americans. The crime took place here in good old America, beloved USA. And some of the things that were hard won during all of those times that people stood up for and sacrificed a lot are being threatened to be removed from us as we speak. So, that not being fun, let's get into this. As I said, the game is afoot. These crimes took place during a turbulent time, as I said before, and at the time of the first murder, almost bringing him halfway to a serial killer, this perpetrator committed a crime, served very little time for it, and got off again, much as other serial killers that we've read about in the past. Instead of getting an extreme punishment, they got kind of a slap on the wrist and went on to hurt other people again as well. So, let's see here. The Beatles were really popular at the time. They had just arrived in the USA, and that was the beginning of what we called Beatlemania. And this was like a phenomenon that had not been seen here in America before. It happened again with Elvis, but this was just like girls were passing out in the street. They were crying. They were carrying on like they knew this band personally. And there was so much more to come as far as fan adoration for the Beatles and many other bands that came along the road after them. The race rioting was going on, and that's what I mean about these hard-fought civil liberties that we won and women's rights that we fought for and obtained that seem to be going backwards in time for whatever reason. They do say that people do live on a time continuum and things go one way or the other direction over time, but really you'd think we'd learned by now. Everything that's going on is just so old and rehashed. The Supremes and the Rolling Stones and Bob Dylan were playing music. They were the popular music at the time. And that, of course, I don't want to get too much into because we all know what those singers stood for. The Supreme, a strong girls band coming up from the projects, becoming a really good group led by Berry Gordy. There's so much drama on that side right there. The Rolling Stones also coming over. It was part of the British wave back then, soon to be followed by the punk waves. Both of them were totally both enjoyable. Loved dancing to all different forms of music. Cassius Clay, who is now known as Muhammad Ali, fought Sonny Liston at the time. He was a young, fun bottle of raging muscle, and that was just the beginning of his long career. At the time, there was a torpedo that attacked one of our destroyers, and this caused us to get into one of the worst world wars that America has ever been into, and the recent one we're just getting out of being another one. There was a very popular serial killer also picked up during this time, not in the same state that this perpetrator was getting ready to operate in. This perpetrator was fairly young at the time he committed the first crimes, and I guess that's why they thought he was salvageable. And we all found out later that no, that wasn't true. Then there seemed to be like a break in time. Things went on. Again, for some reason or another, the perpetrator decided to start committing crime again. At the time that this happened, Walt Disney World had just opened in Orlando, Florida. The first ever televised war, the Vietnam War, was in full swing. The largest attacks by North Vietnam troops across the demilitarized zone in 4 years, and prompts bombing raids to begin again by the United States against Hanoi and Haiphong on April 15th. The Watergate crisis also began around that time, and 4 men were arrested for breaking into the Democratic National Committee headquarters in the Watergate office building in Washington, D.C. Isn't that just ridiculous? I mean, so much stuff has happened as far as politicalness, and we thought that took the cake at the time. We thought that's just not going to repeat itself. We have more dignity than that. And we've had so many other things that have gone wrong or made us look bad or not questioned or been, I don't even know how to describe it, but just so many weird things have happened, especially in recent times here in America. Let's see, and what else was going on? Okinawa is returned to the U.S. Okinawa is returned from the U.S. control back to Japan. That may have been a big mistake. I don't know. The United States... I've got to learn how to enunciate words. I know I've been talking for a long time. The United States Supreme Court rules in Roe v. Wade that a woman cannot be prevented by a state from having an abortion during the first 6 months of pregnancy. Again, that's the first 6 months of pregnancy, Roe versus Wade. And it has been a hot topic and a hot tomato, hot potato, whatever you want to call it, ever since it's been done. And this Roe woman has even come out and identified herself since then. So much time has gone by. It's just strange. Fashion at the time. Bell bottoms, fringed vest, headbands, Mexican sandals that were made out of like this brown leather. Cheech and Chong wore them. Caftans, they were absolutely beautiful. Long straight hair was the absolute epitome of style at that time. There was an alternative, curly haircut. I thought it was really beautiful. It was the gypsy haircut. It was like Cher wore it a lot. There was a lot of good actresses that had that at the time. The shag haircut was another one. Jane Fonda had it on at that time. The Dorothy Hamill cut. That was a wonderful cut. So loved Dorothy Hamill. She was like everything in an athlete at that time I thought a woman should be. Long flowing skirts, that boho look was going on back then. Puka beads. The guy from the Partridge Family, David, whatever his name was. But people fall in love with him and they give him the credit for bringing puka beads into style. Macrame. Everybody had macrame, either a wall hanging or a plant hanging. Every home at least had one or two of them. The styles at the time were pretty bright. Orange and yellow were really popular colors at the time. And music came in the form of CDs. That was an extremely popular format. And people were listening and dancing to Andy Gibb, Donna Summer, That Hot Stuff, Baby Baby, Rod Stewart, Tonight's the Night, The Knack, My Sharona. The fads at the time were pet rocks, long gas lines. That turned out to be the biggest scam in the world. Found people dumping gas in areas they shouldn't have been just so they could keep the prices high and have people waiting hours and hours in line just to get a tank of gas. It really sucked. Let's see. Elvis and Nixon did meet up in the White House, had a little forte there, a little what do you call it, bromance. And then the decade was also known as the Me Decade, which has me really laughing my ass off, because if they only knew how millennials could be, or how millennials quote unquote are said to be. I don't like to judge people or label them like that. I don't think anybody deserves that, but it's quite hilarious. Additionally, the 70s saw a return of handicrafts like latchik rugs, while sports like racquetball and yoga were pretty popular. Yoga on it had lost its popularity. Now it's come back with a bang. Many people read I'm Okay, You're Okay, and The Joy of Sex. Experimented with wife-swapping parties and smoked pot. In general, by the end of the decade, many young people were using their hard-fought freedom to simply do as they please and wear what they wanted, and to grow their hair long, and to have sex and to do drugs. Their liberation, in other words, was intensely personal. The area that this took place was an extremely beautiful area. It said it had all to offer: water, mountains, and it was an enjoyable place of the United States to live in. And at that time, stars and rock stars were definitely attracted to it, and a lot of colleges were there. That was part of the problem. It was just concentrated with young people there trying to have a good time and just enjoy themselves being young people, expressing their love for nature, burning their bras, burning their draft cards, saying, hell no, we won't go. Women standing up for their rights. Ethnic people rioting for what they wanted in the streets. And people did get hurt, no doubt, but they weren't getting shot up and like now. It was like a very undercover current of what was going on. Authority figures could get away with a lot at that point in time. There was a lot of cover-ups, as they still are, but time was different back then. People were expected to dress a certain way, act proper, look proper. A lot of pressure on society. Those pressures aren't in place now, and I think that's a lot of why. And this generation had a lot to do with that, breaking down those boundaries, dressing in a more casual manner, challenging etiquette and all this other things that we considered proper and normal, trying to be more themselves and not being so stiff and straight-laced in society. And it is in this area that our perpetrator made his hunting grounds. Very easy to do. Not a whole lot of challenges. People thought he looked normal. Isn't that what they always say about serial killers? They look normal. And maybe even a little handsome. And there was a certain thing about him and the way he presented himself to these people that made him a part of the community and made people drop their guard with him, thinking, oh, he's okay, he's one of us. Well, no, you never know what really goes through somebody's head at that point in time. Although people in his family may have known about him and what he was capable of, as always, there was a facade, and that facade was very believable to people who were very gullible, to the point that this perpetrator was even able to take 2 victims at a time and continue this game and actually befriending authorities and hanging out in places where the authorities would be. 1, to be able to pick up what is going on, and 2, just to feel part of the crowd. And I don't know if you watched the first episode, part A, and part B. I mentioned that this personality type they do strive for law and order. They appreciate that. But I think underneath, they also appreciate pulling the wool over this type of people's eyes, knowing that they're really smart, very learned, very seasoned in most cases, and making him feel like they're really something because they can get away with this. But normally they only get away with it for a certain amount of time. And in order to be considered a serial killer, you would have to have 4 or more victims. Again, these victims turn out to be women, and a lot of these women were willingly involved with this gentleman. Not to say it's their fault. I never blame the victim because you never know what's going on. We can only speculate at this point what happened to these poor girls. He, however, had no problem with what he did to these women, making all women pay because of being upset with a certain woman. His matriarch, or his mother, was extremely firm and abusive with him, and other women in his life were extremely firm and abusive with him, and he was extremely resentful of this situation. And due to that, eventually this dam that he had been holding up all this anger behind, and all these weird fantasies that he was holding back and trying to act normal, eventually it snapped. The dam broke. All this evil and unable to control this willpower any longer took effect, and this perpetrator began to prowl. And prowl during the day, prowl during the night, whenever it was convenient. And even talking to other victims about who this perpetrator could possibly be and what could possibly be going on, that these women would be turned up missing like they are. Well, with that, I hope I've given you enough information